What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got our Week 13 NFL game picks outright versus the spread, along with our locks of the week. If you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to see our updated thoughts on these games as the week progresses and we get closer to kickoff. And better yet, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for a free newsletter and you will get early access to these picks. All those details in the description. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdowns, I want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsors at Overlay Fantasy Sports, who are taking DFS to a whole nother level. And I specifically want to highlight their matchup shop function, which is an absolute blast. In fact, we've been using it since the start of the NFL season because, let's face it, betting on the same old Team A versus Team B can get a little bit stale, a little bit boring. Well, that's not even close to being the case with the matchup shop of Overlay Fantasy, as it allows you to bet on individual player matchups, and it's super simple. Just pick whichever player you think will have the higher fantasy performance. And just like a regular bet would work, check out the spreads, do your research, and then win some money. You can bet on pretty much any single sport that you want, whether it's NFL, golf, MLB, etc. All those options are there. And again, super simple. Pretty much for any single NFL game coming up, you've got a bunch of different matchups that are always updated and added to. So if it's something as simple as just putting a single submission, you can do that. But guess what? If you want to get a parlay going and double up some of those winnings, you can do that as well. So take advantage of this. All of that homework you're doing for your fantasy lineups, let's have that translate to some big time winnings for your wallet as well. So do yourself a favor and check out Overlay Fantasy's matchup shop now. We kick off Week 13 with an NFC South divisional clash between the New Orleans Saints at the Atlanta Falcons. The Saints, 9-2, took advantage of a Broncos quarterback-less squad, while the Falcons, 4-7, absolutely obliterated the Raiders, where their defense was dominant, something that you don't hear about the Falcons these days too often. But as far as this matchup is concerned, this is actually a rematch of a game that we saw only a couple of weeks ago in the game that featured the debut of Taysom Hill. But even though the Saints won that contest, make no mistake about it, that first game was much closer than the score indicated. And a big reason why is the deficiencies that Taysom Hill has as a passer of the football. We've seen it for 2 weeks in a row. There's a reason why guys like Latavius Murray are getting so much usage now. The Saints are leaning on their rushing attack more so and more so because Taysom Hill just can't get it done as a pure pocket passer. But the silver lining here is that an Atlanta Falcons defense is capable of masking a lot of those deficiencies. And yes, that means I don't think we're going to see the Atlanta Falcons defense dominate like it did last week. Now, to be fair, however, I do think just because of the limitations that Taysom Hill has of his own, the Atlanta Falcons will put up a decent fight throughout this game, and I don't think it will necessarily be a blowout. What we should actually be keeping an eye out for in this game is the status of Julio Jones, because last week he misses that game with a hamstring. Now, potentially that status up in the air again. And even if he does play, that hamstring is such a fickle injury that he might be limited. He might not be 100%. Maybe doesn't even finish the game. But what we're trying to say is this Atlanta Falcons offense, we've known this for a while, is completely different without Julio Jones. And in fact, even though the Falcons had a huge win this last week versus the Raiders, like we mentioned, Matt Ryan in that game didn't do anything astounding. He was very pedestrian. And that won't be possible versus the New Orleans Saints, because as bad as Taysom Hill can be, that Saints offense is still better. It has the better offensive line. It has, very good running backs, a reliable wide receiver, a decent tight end as well. And then the New Orleans Saints have the advantage in the defensive department. Now, again, I don't think we're going to see as dominant of a defensive game from them as we did the first time these two teams played, but still they have the advantage in that area. So basically what we're trying to say is, even though Taysom Hill is a big weakness for this offense, he is in the position to take advantage of weak matchups that the Saints have right now I like the New Orleans Saints to win this game. The spread right now, plus 2.5 for the Atlanta Falcons. Yes, it'll be closer if Julio Jones plays, but if Jones doesn't play, forget about it. I like the New Orleans Saints on the spread to win by at least 3. Next up, we have got an NFC North divisional clash with the Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears. The Lions, 4-7, coming off a loss on Thanksgiving to the Texans. But maybe the bigger news is the firing of Matt Patricia, while the Bears, 5-6, got absolutely shellacked by the Green Bay Packers last week. And now, this is actually a game that's a rematch all the way back from week 1. And in terms of how we feel about this game now versus how we felt about it then, nothing has really changed. And as a reminder, basically what we said is the Bears, this is the one series in the NFC North that they've done really well against. Because if there's any team that Mitch Trubisky plays his best football versus, it's the Detroit Lions. Now that might have something to do with the fact that they were absolutely god-awful defensively. But either way, the statistical history is there. Now, you might say, well, Nick Foles could be back at quarterback for the Chicago Bears. That does not matter to me. I think both guys will be able to beat this Detroit Lions defense. And honestly, for the Bears, the game plan should be simple. Now, if, and that's a big if, the Bears are competent enough to realize that the plan should be, using David Montgomery versus one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL, that's a separate story, but I believe that Montgomery will be heavily involved, and that's going to take a lot of pressure off whoever the quarterback is. Here, I expect a big day from Allen Robinson as well. While on the flip side, I can't say I'm all that confident in the Detroit Lions offensively. Look, maybe they have a little bit of a spark after the firing of Matt Patricia, but Kenny Golladay will miss this game more than likely. DeAndre Swift, the running back, that's been great so far, even though he's a rookie for the Detroit Lions, is expected to return from a concussion, and that'll be a nice boost. But again, versus this great Chicago Bears defense, I'm not sure it'll make that much difference. In the same breath, reports that Matthew Stafford has re-aggravated his hand injury could be a little bit concerning, less than 100%. If he doesn't play, I would say even more so forget about this matchup, because throughout this contest, offensively and defensively, the Bears have the advantage on offense and on defense. So for that reason, I like the Chicago Bears here. I'm not going to overthink it. Suggest the same for you guys as well. The Bears are the better team. They've got the advantage offensively, defensively. I will take them outright. The spread, minus 3.5, not all that big. I think the Bears can cover that number. Moving on, we've got the Cincinnati Bengals at the Miami Dolphins. The Bengals, 2-8-1 after losing to the New York Giants this last week, while the Miami Dolphins, 7-4 after beating the Jets this last week. And now there's a couple things to monitor here. First and foremost, the status of Tua for the Miami Dolphins. I would say right now that the more likely scenario is that Ryan Fitzpatrick starts yet again for the Miami Dolphins, which in my opinion is actually a better thing for their overall offensive efficiency and production, because this offense has more scoring potential with Ryan Fitzpatrick under center, especially in the passing department. But at the end of the day, would it really matter? That's the question here, because last week we saw how bad the Bengals are without Joe Burrow under center. Brendan Allen is not remotely reliable, and the entire offense has become lifeless. Simply put, there is nobody offensively that scares you for the Bengals anymore. And that has a trickle-down effect, especially to the defense, which was already bad enough to begin with, and they are taxed even more so throughout the game with short offensive drives, with inopportune turnovers. We saw it multiple times versus the New York Giants. I expect the Miami Dolphins to have a good effort here offensively and defensively as well. I think the Miami Dolphins can win this game, no problem. They are so much more competent and potent offensively. Unfortunately, without Joe Burrow under center, it's pretty much like we're looking at the Cincinnati Bengals of last year without Andy Dalton, and we all remember how that went. So don't overthink this one. Go with the Miami Dolphins. The spread is high here at minus 11.5. But if Ryan Fitzpatrick plays, I'm that much more confident that the Miami Dolphins can score those points and the defense can lock down and then they can cover that number. So I will take Miami on the spread as well. Next up, we've got the Cleveland Browns at the Tennessee Titans. Both these teams are 8-3, both coming off victories. The Browns taking out the Jaguars, while the Tennessee Titans beating the Colts. Huge win for them as they split that series. But as far as this contest is concerned, first thing that we do want to mention is that weather might be a factor here, as tentatively we are expecting some rain. Now, obviously, the closer we get to kickoff, that's something to monitor and kind of go from there in terms of our expectations for this game. But if that holds true, then we might see a big time rushing focal point for both of these offenses, and God knows they can get that done. The Browns, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and then to the Tennessee Titans, the one, the only, Derrick Henry. They excel in that department. And I would say offensively as a whole, maybe on paper, you like the Cleveland Browns a little bit more so. They've got the healthier offensive line. They have got, two stud running backs. They've got Jarvis Landry. They've got a plethora of talent at tight end. But I would say don't sleep on the Titans, because they have got two good wide receivers in A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. They've got Derrick Henry, who we already mentioned, and potentially might get Humphreys back here as well. And to me, the bigger factor is the play of the two quarterbacks. Neither one of these guys are elite, but as far as efficiency is concerned, Ryan Tannehill is so much more consistent on a week-to-week basis than Baker Mayfield that I kind of have to call this a draw, or maybe even a slight advantage for the Tennessee Titans offensively. Now, yes, you could point to the Browns defense and say that they have some more talent there, but when you look at the season as a whole, they have been pretty up and down throughout. So what we're trying to say is you can score on this team. And honestly, I think this will be a relatively high-scoring game. The Tennessee Titans, they struggle defensively, so I do think that the Browns will get theirs. But at the end of the day, when it comes to which offense I have more trust in, I'm going to go with the quarterback that I trust more, and that is Ryan Tannehill, who on a week-to-week basis has been better, more reliable than Baker Mayfield. That is the key in my eyes. So I'm taking the Tennessee Titans outright. Now, on the spread here at -5.5, that's a different story, because again, especially if the weather conditions come into effect and it becomes one of these slow-moving, ugly type of games, the Cleveland Browns could be a great play on the spread at -5.5. If the Titans win, I do think it'll be right around 3-4 points. So in that scenario, the Browns cover, and that's what I'm going with on the spread. Moving on, we've got the Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans, divisional clash here. The Colts 7-4 after losing to the Tennessee Titans, while the Houston Texans 4-7 after winning on Thanksgiving versus the Detroit Lions. And honestly, this is a game that initially had a lot of scoring potential and interest, but all of a sudden it loses major luster with the PED suspension of Will Fuller. He is done for the season. And considering how big of a factor Fuller has been for this Houston offense all year long, this is a serious hit for them. And sure, I'll admit, Brandon Cooks is no slouch, but losing a viable wide receiver like Fuller will make things harder for everyone offensively, for those wide receivers, for Deshaun Watson, for that rushing attack. It is a trickle-down effect. But to be fair, the Colts are a bit banged up defensively. But honestly, even in that state, we have more faith in them than the Texans' defense, especially when you consider their struggles stopping the rush. And we know that the Colts can get it done in that department because they have got guys like Nyheim Hines, potentially Jonathan Taylor comes back as well, paired with a great offensive line that this will be a focal point in this game. And honestly, looking at the Houston Texans defense as a whole, I anticipate that Phillip Rivers might actually have some success of his own as well. Now again, maybe if Will Fuller was playing, I would actually entertain the idea of a potential upset here because the Houston Texans offense has been successful. It can put up points, but it's going to be a different look now. All of a sudden, there's a big drop-off from, Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks in that duo to the next group of wide receivers here for the Texans. So for that reason, I'm going with the Colts outright. The spread plus 3.5. Again, I will continue to stress this point. If Fuller was playing, I would entertain taking the Texans there. But with him not being available, I will also go with the Colts on the spread. Continuing on, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders at the New York Jets. The Raiders 6-5, coming off, honestly, one of the worst letdown performances this year and in recent memory, as they got absolutely obliterated by the Atlanta Falcons of all teams. But thankfully, on the other side, you have got the 0-11 New York Jets. Another week, another loss. Not sure what else to say here about the Jets. The only thing I can say getting back to the Raiders is that's why losing the Falcons the way that you did, being inconsistent throughout the season, is the reason why some people are hesitant to call the Raiders legitimate playoff contenders. And I would agree. But thankfully for them, they have got the perfect remedy to what ails them, and that is facing the New York Jets. It holds true every single week. Now is no exception. And I fully expect them to get the victory. Sure, the Jets might have some success scoring versus the Raiders, but at the end of the day, they're a mess from top to bottom. As long as they maintain the coaching situation that they have, nothing will get better. They are on their way to 0-16 and the first pick overall in this upcoming draft. But getting back to the Raiders, some news for them is that Josh Jacobs will not be playing here. Yes, that's tough, but honestly, it won't matter all that much. If there was ever a game to miss, it would be the one versus the Jets. I expect Devontae Booker to come in and fill in admirably, maybe even have a pretty successful outing. Huge bounce back game for this entire Raiders offense from top to bottom. And how could it not be, considering that maybe even just scoring 7 points, a single touchdown would be an improvement of what we saw last week. Also, the defense, even though it might give up some big plays here, I think that it'll have a decent outing versus this Jets offense. So all in all, I like the Raiders here. Give me them outright. The spread at plus 8.5, not all that big of a number. Sure, the Jets might score some garbage time points, but we're going to go out on a limb and say the Raiders can cover that 8.5 number. Next up, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Minnesota Vikings. The Jaguars 1-10 after losing in the Browns, while the Minnesota Vikings 5-6. Hell of a comeback effort versus the Carolina Panthers, getting that victory late in that game. Kudos to them. And what I'll say here is that even though there's not a whole lot of wins between these two teams, this could very well actually be the highest scoring game of the week and actually a pretty entertaining contest in general. Because offensively, both these teams have some weapons. For the Vikings, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen expected to return from that COVID designation, Justin Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins can deliver the football to all those guys. Then for the Jaguars, James Robinson has been great in running back and can take advantage of this Minnesota defense. DJ Chark, assuming he comes back, he's also a viable weapon. The problem here, the question mark I should say, is Mike Glennon at quarterback for the Jaguars. Yes, he had a decent performance this last week, but again, having James Robinson do the things he's been doing at the running back position simplifies things a lot for whoever plays quarterback in Jacksonville. The story here is, again, that this could be points galore because both these defenses are pretty bad. The Vikings in the secondary, the Jaguars have been giving up points since the start of the season. But again, they've also been scoring a lot of points as of late. Now, the difference to me here is we're not going to get too crazy. Offensively, the Vikings, they have got the more important advantage. That is Kirk Cousins. Because when I look at the two quarterbacks, Glennon versus Cousins, I've got so much more faith in Cousins, it's not even funny. In terms of who has the higher ability to absolutely implode, Mike Glennon is definitely first in that department. And again, there's just more weapons in Minnesota, period. So at the end of the day, I will take the Vikings outright, but don't be shocked if the Jaguars keep this game close throughout and kind of have the Vikings on upset alert throughout the contest. The spread right now at minus 9.5, I think that's a ludicrously high number. Like I said, the only way I think the Vikings actually cover that number and win by 10, 11 points is if Glennon just implodes and is disastrous. Not saying that that's impossible, but again, I think there's a lot of factors the Jaguars have going for them offensively and how bad the Vikings are defensively that will prevent that from happening. So for that reason, Minnesota Vikings outright, but the Jacksonville Jaguars on the spread. Next up, we got the LA Rams at the Arizona Cardinals, NFC West divisional clash. The Rams, 7-4, just got upset by the San Francisco 49ers. We've said it before, we'll say it again, and it holds true in this game, as a matter of fact. Wacky things happen when NFC West divisional opponents square off. Forget about the records. On the other side, you've got the Cardinals 6-5, equally bad loss for them, being upset by the New England Patriots this last week, where offensively they couldn't get anything going. Now, as far as this game is concerned, the spread at plus 2.5 for the Arizona Cardinals. As far as I'm concerned, this is a coin flip of a game. Like I said before, with the NFC West, forget about the records. Either team can win here. If I had to guess right now, I think this is a series that can get split when it's all said and done. And honestly, the way that I'm doing this is I'm going to hedge my bets. Because for the Cardinals, the way that they win, it's honestly a pretty singular type of situation. Kyler Murray has to go back to MVP type of play, and he has to shoulder the biggest load here, not only as a passer, but also as a rusher. He has to return to doing that really well because he's facing an LA Rams defense that's going to be easier said than done against. And that's the problem here. I continue to look at this matchup. Defensively, the Rams have got, in my opinion, the significant advantage. And offensively, the Rams have the better matchup when you look at the Arizona defense that they are facing. Offensively, both these teams have talent, but it's going to be much tougher sledding for Arizona and Kyler Murray. That's why I have to give the slight edge here to the LA Rams. But like I said before, anything can happen in this contest. So as far as a betting perspective is concerned, what I would advise you guys to do is, either just avoid this game or hedge your bets. Take the LA Rams outright, but then take the Arizona Cardinals on the spread. I think whichever way this game goes, it will be very close. And at the end of the day, if you really feel like taking the Arizona Cardinals to upset the Rams, I don't blame you one bit. Like I said before, I think this series is split. Wouldn't shock me if the home team wins in each respective situation. So right now, just to hedge your bets a little bit, we're going with the Rams outright, but the Cardinals on the spread. Next up, we've got the New York Giants at the Seattle Seahawks. The Giants 4-7 coming off a win over the Bengals, while the Seattle Seahawks 8-3 beating the Philadelphia Eagles this last week. And as this game stands right now, the status of Daniel Jones for the New York Giants is up in the air. And guess what? If Daniel Jones does not play and doesn't start under center for the Giants, this game could be one of the biggest blowouts of the week. It's already got a relatively high spread at -9.5 for Seattle. But if Daniel Jones doesn't suit up, I have full confidence that Seattle can cover that number and win by at least 2 touchdowns. Because I'll give you this comparison. Daniel Jones is to the New York Giants what Joe Burrow was to the Cincinnati Bengals. Without Daniel Jones under center, the New York Giants are basically, offensively speaking, the Cincinnati Bengals with Brendan Allen or whoever the hell you decide to put in there. Even though they've got the offensive pieces, none of them are viable anymore, and the offense is in a whole lot of trouble. And sure, I understand that this Giants defense has been stingy as of late, but they're not going to be able to keep the Giants in this game on their own. And even more so when you consider that the opponent is Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. So what we're saying here is feel very comfortable in taking the Seattle Seahawks outright. Even honestly, if Daniel Jones plays, I'm still taking the Seattle Seahawks. Then we can have a conversation. If Daniel Jones plays, to me, it's more so a spread conversation. If he plays, then I would entertain the New York Giants on the spread. I think it comes to a decent value then, considering the issues that the Seattle Seahawks have in the secondary. So that's honestly the main thing to keep an eye out for in this game, because without Daniel Jones, this game is a wrap. And if that is the case, you go the Seattle Seahawks outright and on the spread regardless of the number. Moving on, we have got the Philadelphia Eagles at the Green Bay Packers. The Eagles 3-7-1. Stop us if you've heard this before, but the Eagles are coming off yet another loss, this time to the Seahawks, where Carson Wentz didn't look all that great. On the flip side, the Green Bay Packers absolutely dominated the Bears. But guess what? Even though they're 8-3, their inability to stop the run was exposed yet again defensively. And say what you will about the Philadelphia Eagles, but funny enough, they actually have several very capable running backs that can take advantage of this. And guess what? That in turn opens things up for the passing attack. And look, for what it's worth, we're not saying that the Eagles will win this game, but think about this. The Eagles have actually been very good at keeping games close all season long. And when you take into account the almost double-digit spread, which is at -8.5 for the Packers, then all of a sudden, value-wise, we actually think that the Eagles are a sneaky good pick on the spread. Now, if you don't have confidence in that, no problem. You can't go wrong with taking the Packers outright here with the sporadic play of Wentz, and then on the other side, the tremendous play of Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. But what we would personally do is go with the Green Bay Packers outright. I think that's obviously the safest pick here. But on the spread, all season long, the Eagles have, kept games close and haven't really lost by double digits all that much. So on the spread, as crazy as it seems, we think the Eagles are a great pick here. Next up, we've got the New England Patriots at the LA Chargers. The Patriots 5-6, coming off a nice, surprising win over the Arizona Cardinals. But I would say don't get too excited because that offense still showed us how flawed it is, especially in the passing department. While the LA Chargers 3-8, kind of an expected loss versus the Buffalo Bills. They weren't really getting blown out, but at the end of the day, some mistakes here and there, and the Chargers couldn't play a complete game. So that was an expected result. The better team won. And for what it's worth, I think this is one of the few games, maybe one or two others, on the week that is a coin flip situation, because I could see either one of these teams winning. And the betting public suggests that they agree with us here because the spread at only -1.5 for the Chargers. And the way that I see this, now I'll agree with this part of the equation. The Chargers have the much better offense. In terms of weapons, it's not even close. And honestly, in terms of quarterback play as well, Cam Newton right now is nowhere to be found as far as a passing NFL quarterback is concerned. But there is a but here. For what it's worth, the New England defense and Bill Belichick have been very good at slowing down young quarterbacks. And in truth, we think that this trend will continue and actually expect that this game could be somewhat low scoring and relatively close. In that scenario, we just cannot go with the Chargers. We know their history in these close games. I've got more confidence, if that is the scenario that plays out, that the Patriots pull off the upset here, which I'm not even sure it would be that big of an upset when you consider the spread in a one-score margin type of game. So for that reason, give us the Patriots outright and on the spread. Looking at Sunday Night Football, we have got the Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. Divisional clash here. The Broncos 4-7, losing big time to the New Orleans Saints. But when you consider that they didn't have a quarterback, well, they get a pass. Kansas City Chiefs 10-1, took care of business versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. The better overall team won. And this is the way we will lead the breakdown in this game. If you're a Broncos fan, hey, good news, Denver. Drew Lock is expected to return at quarterback. Bad news, you're facing the Chiefs, who absolutely destroyed you the last time you met, and not much has changed since then. Honestly, it's tough for us to make a case for the Broncos here, other than saying that this is a divisional game where the Broncos could hang in there for longer than expected if their defense shows up. But is there really any such thing as a defense being able to stop the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes? Because we haven't seen it all that often this season. The Chiefs are the better team here. They've got a defense that's underrated, and their offense is good for almost 30 points every single week. And honestly, that might be generous. That might be a little bit too conservative. We don't see the Broncos getting to that mark offensively. So for that reason, I would say don't overthink this one. Go with the Chiefs outright. The spread at minus 13.5. That's the only place, that you might have a little cause for pause. But again, I'm going with the Chiefs across the board. I'm not overthinking this one. I don't think all that much has changed since the first time these two teams faced off, and that was a game where the Chiefs absolutely blew out the Broncos. I expect a similar situation here. Getting to our first Monday game, we've got the Washington football team at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Washington at 4-7 after absolutely dominating the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving, while the Steelers 11-0. Look, COVID rescheduling could not stop them. They take out the Baltimore Ravens. And all of a sudden, hey, Washington is tied for the division lead and now facing another fellow division leader. And look, of course, we say this in jest to some degree, but funny enough, if there was actually a week where the Steelers could be on upset alert and have their perfect record spoiled, it would be now when you look at the rest of their schedule. The reason for this is that Washington has a very good defense and enough offensive pieces. Terry McLaurin, Gibson, McKissick, with an experienced quarterback that doesn't make too many mistakes. And any way you slice that, that is a winning formula. Now, of course, this means that Alex Smith will have to outplay Ben Roethlisberger, which is easier said than done. But we're just saying don't sleep on Washington in this game. The Steelers, like we said, are dealing with scheduling fiasco and the COVID drama, which could be a little bit of a disadvantage from that perspective for them. Now, of course, on paper, the Steelers have the even better defense and the even better offense with more weapons and the quarterback that's airing out the football even better than Alex Smith, but we're just predicting a close game here regardless. Now, at the end of the day, we'll still go with the Steelers to win outright, but when you look at the spread, the Steelers at minus 8.5, they're going to continue to get the best foot forward from whoever they play in order to spoil that record. We actually love Washington on the spread. I think this will be a game that will be surprisingly very close, and the Steelers might even have to come back from behind to get the victory. And I'll say it now, don't be shocked if somehow Washington beats the Steelers. So for that reason, I'll play it safe outright. I'll go with the Steelers there, but it's such a high number on the spread at minus 8.5. I am hammering Washington there. Looking at our second Monday game, we've got the Buffalo Bills at the San Francisco 49ers. The Bills 8-3, nice win over the Chargers. 49ers 5-6, very impressive win over the LA Rams. And look, it might seem like we're still not respecting San Francisco, but we think the spread for this game is too low. The 49ers are underdogs as well. I think they should be, but that number is only plus 2.5. I think last week was a situation where you saw two divisional opponents square off in a situation where upsets are much more likely to happen, but that's not necessarily the case this week. We do expect, to be fair, the San Francisco defense to have some nice moments, but at the end of the day, we have much more confidence in Josh Allen than we do Nick Mullins. Weapons like Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, John Brown if he plays, and Singletary, Zach Moss make us give the advantage to the Bills. Now, this would, of course, be a different situation if the 49ers were healthy, but since that's not the case, and the Bills also have a solid secondary, we think Buffalo pulls away in this game as it progresses. I like the Buffalo Bills outright. And then on the spread, I think, like I said before, it's still a little bit too small of a number at plus 2.5, so I would go with the Bills there too. Finally, looking at Tuesday Night Football, we've got the Dallas Cowboys at the Baltimore Ravens. The Cowboys 3-8 after losing to Washington, while the Ravens 6-5 losing to the Steelers this last week on Wednesday of all days. But that's what happens when you have an uncontrolled COVID breakout. And that leads to the question, will the Ravens even have enough warm bodies to compete here? Because sure, if the Ravens had all their players healthy, then this is a situation where it's an easy game to predict. But that's far from the case right now, because the single biggest player to pay attention to is obviously Lamar Jackson, like you would expect, quarterback, and last week, we saw what this Baltimore offense looked like with Jackson missing. It's even more limited than it was before. In fact, if Jackson misses this game, which I would say right now is, kind of up in the air, don't be shocked to see the Cowboys maybe even get the upset win. That's how much of an impact losing your starting quarterback can have, especially when it's a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. So for that reason, our advice here would be hold off on making any bets until we know for certain what the situation is with Lamar Jackson. And even then, just because, so many guys were impacted for the Ravens, I might just avoid the outright pick here in general. I would say where this gets really interesting is the spread, because right now the Baltimore Ravens are at -9.5. In my opinion, that number is way too big. If Lamar Jackson doesn't play, I love that number even more so. But even if Jackson returns, I think there might be some fatigue, things like that. Obviously, I don't know what the situation will be 100%. I don't know how many guys will be back, how many won't be. So your best bet might be just to avoid this game in general and just avoid teams that are coming off of, huge COVID outbreaks so recently. Right now, as the game stands, I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens outright, but I'm going with the Dallas Cowboys on the spread. So with that, we wrap up our pick'ems. Now looking at our locks of the week, we start with the Bengals at the Dolphins. Easy one here. Give us the Dolphins all day long. Regardless if it's Tua or Fitzpatrick, the Dolphins will get the victory. Simply put, without Joe Burrow, the Bengals are one of the worst teams in the NFL. There's a reason why without him, they were picking first overall last year. Go with the Dolphins here. Next up, Raiders at the Jets. The Raiders will bounce back versus the New York Jets. That is almost a guarantee. From their quarterback to their running backs to their wide receivers to their defense, I'm going with the Raiders here. I don't think the Jets will mess around and accidentally get a victory here and screw up their chances to have that first overall pick. Go with the Raiders. Next up, Giants at Seattle. I'm going with the Seattle Seahawks, even if someone like Daniel Jones plays or not, but if he misses this game, it becomes even much more of a slam dunk. I just don't see the Giants being able to keep up with the Seattle Seahawks offense. And finally, we've got the Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. Look, first time around, this game was a blowout in favor of the Chiefs. Since then, not all that much has changed. Go with the Chiefs here. Yet again, they are the much better team from top to bottom. So with that, we wrap up our Week 13 NFL game picks, outright versus the spread, along with our locks of the week. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to see our thoughts on these games closer to kickoff. And better yet, if you guys want early access to all these picks, then check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for our free newsletter. All those details in the description, and you will get early access to these picks. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.